It was a quiet evening, the kind where the silence settles deep into your bones. I had just poured myself a drink, the amber liquid catching the dim light of the room. The weight of the day pressed against my shoulders, but I found solace in the stillness. That was until my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. My brother. Strange. He wasn't the type to call without a reason. The moment I answered, I knew something was wrong. "James, listen, I don't know how to tell you this." His voice was unsteady, hesitant. "But I just saw Melissa. She's with someone else." A slow, creeping numbness spread through me. "What do you mean?" My voice was steady, too steady. "I saw them, man. She was kissing him. And then, they went into a hotel together." The words hit like a sledgehammer. My grip tightened around the glass in my hand. My heart didn't race. It didn't sink. It simply stopped. I swallowed hard. "You're sure?" "I'm sorry, James. I wish I wasn't." For a long moment, I said nothing. I could hear my brother breathing on the other end, waiting for me to explode, to break down. But I didn't. Something inside me had already begun to shift, like ice cracking beneath the weight of something heavy. "Where?" I asked finally, my voice colder than I'd ever heard it. "The Blackwood Hotel. Room 312. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "Thank you." "James, what are you going to do?" I hung up without answering. Setting the glass down, I exhaled slowly. The room around me blurred, the edges of my vision darkening. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even angry. I was something much, much worse. I was calm, and I knew exactly what I had to do. I sat in the dim glow of my study, the weight of my brother's words sinking deep into my bones. The Blackwood Hotel. Room 312. Melissa. Another man. It should have felt like my world was collapsing, but instead, a chilling clarity settled over me. I reached for my drink, but my hand stopped midway. No, not now. Not tonight. There was no room for foggy thoughts, no space for distraction. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed the truth not through the lens of my brother's voice, but raw, unfiltered, undeniable. Pulling on my coat, I moved with deliberate steps. Every action felt calculated, as if my body had already accepted what my heart refused to. When I stepped outside, the night air was crisp, biting against my skin, but I barely felt it. My car was parked in the driveway, waiting like a loyal soldier before battle. The drive to the hotel was silent, the only sound the soft hum of the engine and the steady rhythm of my breathing. My mind, however, was anything but still. I thought about Melissa, the woman who had once been my world, my home. The woman who, just this morning, had kissed me goodbye with the same lips that had betrayed me tonight. Had it been going on for weeks? Months? Longer? Had I been blind? Or had she been careful? The questions clawed at my mind, but they no longer mattered. What mattered was what I would find in room 312. I pulled into the hotel's parking lot, choosing a space that offered a clear view of the entrance. And then, I waited. Minutes passed, stretching endlessly, until a familiar figure stepped into view. Melissa. She was laughing, her hand tucked into the arm of a man I didn't recognize. My stomach twisted, but my face remained impassive. She looked happy, carefree, as if she wasn't walking into a hotel with a man who wasn't her husband. They disappeared inside. I counted to 10, then got out of the car. My movements were smooth, methodical. I wasn't here to make a scene. I wasn't here to beg for answers. I was here to end this. And Melissa would never see it coming. The Blackwood Hotel lobby was polished and pristine, the kind of place where everything gleamed just enough to make people forget they were doing something dirty. A concierge gave me a polite nod as I walked in, unaware of the storm brewing beneath my calm exterior. I moved through the hallways with quiet precision, the soft carpet swallowing my footsteps. Room 312 was at the far end of the third floor. I stopped in front of the door, my heart hammering once, just once, before settling into an eerie stillness. Through the door, I could hear muffled voices, laughter, Melissa's laugh. I had always loved that sound. It used to be mine. Now, it belonged to someone else. My fingers curled into a fist, but I forced myself to stay in control. Reaching into my pocket, I pulled out the small plastic card I had acquired from the front desk. $100 bill and a well-placed lie about needing a spare key had been all it took. People assumed you were trustworthy when you spoke with certainty. I slid the key into the lock, pressing my other hand against the door to muffle the sound of it clicking open. I didn't burst in. I didn't slam the door. I stepped inside, quiet as a shadow. The sight before me was exactly what I had expected, and yet, something inside me fractured when I saw it with my own eyes. Melissa, in the arms of another man, their bodies tangled in a way that left no room for doubt. She hadn't even noticed me yet. For a fleeting moment, I thought about saying her name, about making her look at me, making her realize what she had done. But I no longer needed her explanations, her apologies, or her tears. Instead, I simply closed the door behind me and locked it. Melissa's laughter died. The man turned first, confusion flashing across his face. Melissa followed his gaze, her smile fading as her eyes met mine. For the first time that night, I allowed myself a small smile. Don't stop on my account. Melissa's face drained of color so fast I thought she might faint. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The man beside her, half-dressed, tangled in hotel sheets, stared at me with wide, startled eyes. James? Melissa finally whispered, pulling the sheets around her like they could somehow shield her from the truth. From me. I stepped forward, slow and deliberate. The air in the room was thick, suffocating. The other man, her lover, her secret, began to move, reaching for his clothes, probably debating whether to run or grovel. I wasn't interested in either. Don't. My voice was calm, almost casual. The kind of tone that made people nervous because it lacked any obvious emotion. He froze, his hands hovering in the air. Melissa swallowed hard, her eyes darting between me and him. James, listen. I held up a hand, and to my surprise, she fell silent. Maybe she recognized that something in me had shifted. Maybe, for the first time, she realized there would be no screaming match, no pleading, no bargaining for forgiveness. I turned my attention to her lover. What's your name? He hesitated. Ethan. Ethan. I rolled the name over in my mouth like a foreign object, something unpleasant I needed to spit out. How long? His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. He looked to Melissa, as if she could save him, but she was too busy shrinking into herself. Good. James, please. How long? My voice was sharper this time, cutting through whatever pathetic excuses she was about to throw my way. Ethan exhaled shakily. A few months. I nodded, absorbing the words. Not days. Not weeks. Months. Melissa flinched, like she could see the way those words burrowed into me, poisoning what was left of the life we had built together. You love him? I asked, my voice devoid of curiosity. She hesitated. That was enough of an answer. I let the silence stretch, let her sit with the weight of what she had done. Then, finally, I exhaled and took a step back. Get dressed, I told Ethan, my voice even controlled. And get out. He scrambled to obey, never once meeting my eyes. Melissa stayed silent, watching him like she wanted to stop him, like she wanted to ask him to stay. That made something deep in my chest twist, but I didn't let it show. Within minutes, Ethan was gone. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving just the two of us in the suffocating silence of that hotel room. Melissa gripped the sheets tighter. James, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled something out, tossing it onto the bed beside her. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as she stared at the envelope. Divorce papers. Signed. Dated. Ready. Her breath hitched. You already. You made your choice, Melissa, I said, my voice almost gentle. Now I've made mine. I turned and walked out without another word. She didn't follow me. The night air was cold as I stepped out of the Blackwood Hotel, but I barely felt it. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. If anything, I felt lighter than I had in years. Melissa hadn't run after me. She hadn't begged. She hadn't even called my name as I walked out of that hotel room and left behind everything we had built. That, more than anything, told me what I needed to know. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't some moment of weakness she regretted. This was a choice she had made, over and over again, for months. And I had been too blind, too trusting to see it. I reached my car, but I didn't get in. Instead, I leaned against the driver's side door, staring up at the building, watching as the lights from room 312 still glowed faintly against the dark sky. How many nights had she spent there? How many times had she whispered his name instead of mine? Had she thought about me at all, even for a second? Or had she buried the thought of her husband in the same place she buried her vows? A small part of me, the part that still remembered the good times, the part that had once loved her with everything I had, wanted to hurt. But I didn't. I had passed the point of pain. I had reached something colder, something final. I didn't go home right away. There was no home to go to anymore. Not really. Instead, I drove. The city blurred past me, neon lights reflecting in the rain-slicked streets, casting shadows that stretched and twisted like ghosts. I didn't have a destination in mind, but my hands seemed to know where to take me. 15 minutes later, I pulled into my brother's driveway. The house was dark, but I knew he was awake. He was probably sitting on his couch, waiting for my call, wondering how badly I had taken the news he had given me just hours ago. I knocked once, and a few seconds later, the door swung open. "James," David said, relief flooding his face as he stepped aside to let me in. "I wasn't sure if you'd come by." I walked past him, shrugging off my coat, my movements calm, steady. "It's done," I said simply. He closed the door behind me. "You saw them." "Room 312. I sat down on his couch, running a hand over my face. "You were right. Everything you told me." David exhaled heavily and sat across from me. I didn't want to be. I looked up at him, studying my younger brother, the man who had been forced to be the bearer of the worst news of my life. He looked torn, guilty, like he somehow felt responsible for the destruction Melissa had caused. "You did the right thing, Dave," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I needed to know." He nodded slowly, but I could tell something was still bothering him. I had known him long enough to recognize when he was holding something back. "What?" I asked. He hesitated. "It's just, you seem too calm." I gave a short, humorless laugh. "Would you rather I be screaming?" "No, but—" He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I expected more. More anger. More something. I thought about that for a moment. The truth was, I had felt the anger. The betrayal. The raw, gut-wrenching pain that came with watching my wife in another man's arms. But something inside me had shifted the moment I stepped into that hotel room. I had accepted it. There was no changing what had happened. No taking back the months of lies, the stolen moments, the whispered names in the dark. Melissa had burned our marriage to the ground, and I had simply chosen to walk away from the ashes instead of trying to salvage what was already gone. "I'm done, Dave," I said finally. "I'm not wasting another second on her." His eyes searched mine, looking for something, maybe proof that I was just saying what I thought I should, that I was holding back some deeper pain. But he found nothing, because there was nothing left to find. Melissa had killed whatever love I had for her the moment she hesitated to say she didn't love him. The next morning, I didn't go into work. I didn't answer my phone, didn't respond to the texts from mutual friends who had probably already heard whispers of what had happened. I sat in my apartment, the one I had moved into 2 weeks ago when Melissa and I had started taking space from each other, and I planned. I had already prepared for this. My lawyer had drawn up the divorce papers the moment I suspected something was wrong. Last night, I had given them to Melissa, and now the only thing left was to ensure she understood one very important thing. I wasn't just leaving her. I was erasing her. I opened my laptop and began the process. Bank accounts were separated. Any joint assets were divided the way I had already agreed upon. My name was removed from every shared responsibility, mortgage, bills, everything. And then came the part that truly mattered. Social media accounts? Deleted. Shared pictures, messages, videos? Gone. Her number? Blocked. I went through every trace of her in my life and wiped it clean. Every reminder, every piece of evidence that she had ever been a part of me. By the time I was done, it was like she had never existed. At noon, my phone rang. An unknown number. I debated ignoring it, but something told me to answer. I pressed the phone to my ear. "James." A pause. Then, "You really signed them?" Melissa's voice. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. "Yes." Another pause. I could hear the tremble in her breath, the disbelief. "You didn't even want to talk about it?" "What's there to talk about?" I asked, my tone completely devoid of emotion. "You made your choice. I made mine. James, I hung up. She called again. I sent it a voicemail. I wouldn't listen to whatever excuses she had left. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of knowing she had any power over me. Melissa was nothing more than a mistake in my past, and I would make sure she stayed there. Melissa called again the next morning. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail this time, her voice shaking, whispering my name like it still meant something. I deleted it without listening to more than the first second. She was grasping now, realizing too late that she had lost control, that I wasn't playing by the rules she had probably envisioned. The ones where I yell, beg, demand explanations. The ones where I sit across from her in a dimly lit cafe, my hands trembling as I ask, why? But there was no why left to ask. She made her choice. I made mine. The divorce would be finalized within weeks. My lawyer was efficient, and the papers had been prepared well in advance. Melissa had no grounds to fight anything. We had no children, no shared debt, and I had already moved out of our home. There was nothing left to untangle except her expectations of how this would go. She thought I would be another man she could manipulate, just like Ethan. She was wrong. I spent the afternoon closing the last open ends of our life together. Bank statements, email accounts, every small thread that tied me to her, it all had to go. It was satisfying, the methodical nature of it. It kept me focused, kept my mind from wandering into useless emotions. Then, as I was packing up the last of my things at my apartment, my brother called. "Hey," David said, his voice cautious. "She's looking for you." I sighed. I figured. "She came to my place," he continued, banging on the door at 7 in the morning like a damn lunatic. "Said she just needed to talk to you." I leaned back against the kitchen counter, running a hand through my hair. I wasn't surprised. She was losing control, and Melissa hated losing control more than anything. "What did you tell her?" I asked. David snorted. "Told her you didn't want to talk. That she should leave you alone." He hesitated, then added, "She cried, James." Like, full breakdown. I almost felt bad for her. I closed my eyes for a brief second. I could picture it, Melissa standing on David's porch, her perfect world crumbling around her. She had always been good at making people feel sorry for her. But not me. Not anymore. "She cried because she lost, Dave," I said. "Not because she's sorry." "Yeah," he admitted. I figured as much. There was a pause between us, heavy but not uncomfortable. David had always been the one person I could rely on, and right now, I was grateful for his presence. "Do you need anything?" he asked after a moment. I exhaled, shaking my head even though he couldn't see me. "No, I'm good." And for the first time in a long time, I actually meant it. That night, I went back to the house. Our house. It wasn't my home anymore, but I had one last thing to take care of before I could walk away completely. The driveway was empty when I pulled up. Melissa wasn't here. Good. That made things easier. The key still fit in the lock, but it wouldn't for much longer. The papers were in motion, and soon, the house would be hers alone. I stepped inside, inhaling the familiar scent of lavender and something distinctly her. It didn't hurt the way I thought it would. If anything, it felt foreign, like I had walked into a place that no longer belonged to me. I moved through the house, past the framed photos still hanging on the walls. I didn't stop to look at them. They were just remnants of another life, one I had already left behind. In the bedroom, I found what I was looking for. My wedding ring. It sat on the nightstand, untouched since the night I had taken it off. I picked it up, rolling the cool metal between my fingers. Once, it had meant something. Now, it was just a piece of jewelry. I placed it on the bed, right in the center of Melissa's pillow. A parting gift. A silent message. And then, without a second glance, I walked out the door and never looked back. The next week was quiet. Peaceful, even. Melissa stopped calling. Maybe she finally understood. Maybe she realized that I wasn't going to give her the dramatic confrontation she wanted. I went back to work. My colleagues, who had whispered behind my back when the rumors first started, were now treating me the same as they always had. My boss offered a quiet nod of acknowledgement when I walked in that Monday morning. Nothing more, nothing less. I appreciated that. The only unexpected thing was Ethan. I saw him once, 3 days after my final visit to the house. I was leaving a coffee shop when I spotted him across the street, standing near a bus stop. He saw me too. For a brief moment, our eyes met. He looked unsure, guilty. I didn't give him the satisfaction of a reaction. I simply got in my car and drove away. A month later, the divorce was finalized. There was no courtroom drama, no heated arguments. Just signatures on a page, a legal declaration that we were now strangers. Melissa didn't show up in person. Her lawyer handled everything. That night, David and I sat on his back porch, drinking whiskey. "It's done," I said, staring up at the sky. David nodded, taking a slow sip from his glass. "How do you feel?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. For months, I had expected the end of my marriage to leave a hole in me, to feel like something had been violently ripped away. But now, as I sat there, breathing in the cool night air, I realized something. I wasn't empty. I was free. "I feel good," I admitted. David grinned. "Good. Because I have a feeling Melissa isn't taking it as well." I smirked. "Not my problem." We clinked our glasses together, and for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to relax. Melissa was my past, and I was finally looking forward to my future. A week after the divorce was finalized, I woke up to an unfamiliar feeling: peace. No more waiting for the next call. No more anticipating the next betrayal. No more Melissa. She had disappeared from my life as thoroughly as I had erased her. No texts, no emails, nothing. It was like she had accepted her fate and moved on, which suited me just fine. But ghosts don't vanish so easily. It was a Saturday afternoon when I saw her again. I had just stepped out of the grocery store, my arms full of bags, when I caught sight of her across the parking lot. She wasn't alone. Ethan was with her. They stood next to his car, talking. She looked different, tired, thinner, like the weight of what she had done had finally settled onto her shoulders. He looked tense, his hands shoved into his pockets. For a split second, I wondered if he had realized what I had known all along, that Melissa wasn't the kind of woman who would ever be satisfied with what she had. She was always searching, always reaching for something just out of grasp. She turned her head and saw me. Our eyes met. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, without a word, I turned away, got into my car, and drove off. She was the one who had chased something new. She was the one who had let go. And now, I was the one who refused to look back. Months passed. Melissa became nothing more than a distant memory, a chapter in my life that had been written and closed. I focused on myself, on my work, my health, my own happiness. I moved into a new apartment, one that had nothing of her in it. No lingering scents of lavender, no old pictures in forgotten drawers. Just me, a blank slate, a fresh start. For the first time in years, I felt lighter. I reconnected with old friends. I started going to the gym again. I traveled, spent weekends in places I'd always wanted to visit but never had the chance to. And one night, at a small bar in the heart of the city, I met someone. Her name was Claire. She had kind eyes and a sharp wit, and when she laughed, it wasn't forced or rehearsed, it was real. We talked for hours that night. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people existing in the same moment. I didn't tell her about Melissa. Not yet. Because for the first time, I wasn't defined by the woman who had betrayed me. I was just me. And that was enough. It had been almost a year since that night at the Blackwood Hotel when I got the letter. It was from Melissa. I stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. Inside was a short note, written in her familiar handwriting. James, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to respond. But I need you to know that I regret everything. Not just what I did, but how I did it. You didn't deserve that. I hope you're happy. I really do. Melissa. I folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. Then, without hesitation, I tossed it into the fireplace and watched it burn. Some people needed closure. I had already found mine. One evening, I found myself walking along the waterfront, the city lights reflecting off the dark water. Claire was beside me, her hand tucked into the crook of my arm. We had been seeing each other for months now. It was easy, effortless in a way I never knew relationships could be. She didn't ask about my past, and I didn't feel the need to explain it, because it didn't matter anymore. Melissa was a story I had lived, but she wasn't the one I was writing now. I looked over at Claire and saw something I hadn't in a long time: possibility. Not for revenge, not for proving a point, but for something real, something good. I smiled. For the first time in years, I wasn't defined by betrayal. I was defined by what came after. And what came after was mine to build. And this time, I would get it right.